Welcome back to the Kelowna Real Estate Podcast. I'm your mortgage broker host, Taylor Atkinson.
And I'm your real estate agent host, Matt Glenn. We have a special guest today, another real estate agent, co-host, half host, forced
Half
host.
host,
Yeah.
forced host, blackmailed host for the day.
Yeah.
But I did get the office, so thanks, babe.
Yeah, so Emily is my wife, 2.5 times returning guest. This
Yeah.
is a half show for her, but two-time Olympian, bronze medal, played on the women's Olympic soccer team. So relevant information. Obviously, Olympics are going on in Paris right now. So we wanted to bring her on to commentate a little bit on what's been going on with the, let's call it drone scandal.
Yeah,
Drone
with the
gate.
Canada women's national soccer team. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy. We got an insider right here.
The
You're
insider
giving
info.
interviews to a few other people too, eh? So
Yeah, CBC reached out. I think everyone wants some insider info,
yeah,
which I probably don't have a lot of. I do know the girls. I know
yeah,
Bev as
yeah,
well as a human. I've never
yeah.
played for her. So yeah, what do you guys want to know?
What happened from your point of view?
Okay, so quick rundown. If anyone doesn't know,
Yeah.
the Canadian coaches were caught filming a closed door practice ahead of the Olympics with a drone, and the pilot actually got arrested, I think.
Yeah.
Joey Lombardi, unfortunately, got arrested by French authorities, and the Canadian coaches were sent home, and the team was docked 6 points, which is a pretty huge punch in the gut when you're trying to get past the first round in the Olympics.
So, okay, can we just linger on this arrested part? So, did he get arrested for the spying or for just flying a drone when he shouldn't have been flying a drone at all?
Flying in unauthorized airspace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
So he was arrested by French authorities, I think. And the jail sentence was like a year, but they reduced it to 8 months or something crazy like that. So we don't know where Joey is.
yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Hopefully he's okay.
Yeah, let's hope. Yeah. Yeah, so this has kind of rocked the sports world, at least the Canadian soccer world, eh? Like, how is everybody taking it? Like, I'm imagining the players are pretty upset, even though that they have persevered super well so far.
Yeah, I think everyone was really upset. I can only imagine how the players felt. Like I was devastated to hear it because
Yeah,
it is pretty insane. It's not something that Canada has ever done that we knew
yeah,
of. So to hear that was happening was devastating. And I'm sure they felt a billion times worse being there and kind of feeling their Olympic dream slip away from them. But yeah, they've obviously responded in the best possible way. And it's
yeah.
definitely been quite the story. It's created some drama around the team.
How's it ever?
What a cool story in terms of like adversity, like they had to win every single game. Other teams had to lose or tie to get them on. So, yeah, now they're advanced. This show will be coming out after their next game, right? Hopefully they advance and like, yeah, what a cool story.
So they got docked 6 points. They got the 9 points. So they
Yeah.
have gotten farther than they should have. Now, like, it's kind of
Yeah.
just back to a regular tournament.
It's really exciting, yeah. They were -3 after winning the first game, and then they had
Yeah,
to win against France, which France is,
yeah,
like, one of the best teams in the world,
yeah.
and so, yeah, they scored in the last minute. I actually cried after they scored. I had real tears coming down my face. I was so emotional,
Yeah,
and then, yeah, they beat Colombia, so they're moving on, and now everything restarts.
yeah. That is very exciting. So good for
Yeah.
them for kind of getting past that. And I imagine that there's still chips to fall in this whole saga, with the spying situation. Like, the story doesn't
Yeah.
seem totally finished yet, but
It's crazy, yeah. Honestly, I think there'll be more that comes out in the future after
yeah,
some investigations are done, but it
yeah,
is pretty wild. Like, Bev as a human is, I know, a very good human. As a
yeah.
coach, she probably made some very bad decisions, some shocking ones. So, yeah, we'll see kinda where it started, I guess.
It's funny when Canada appealed, they appealed the points, but they didn't appeal any of the suspensions or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think they're quite ready to forgive just
No,
yet.
I thought that was notable, like, to do that. Like, listen, yeah, we fucked it, but
Yeah,
let's not punish the players here. So I thought that was
yeah.
pretty cool. Yeah.
Ultimately, I think it brought them together, like,
Yeah.
when their backs are against the wall, the only thing you can do is either come together or break apart, and they came together, so, yeah, it's been pretty cool to watch, actually.
Yeah. This dovetails super well with our guest today, Ezra Cremers, who is a property manager at Vantage West and very involved in the soccer, which I did not know until we started talking.
Yeah, so that's actually how I met him through the Best of Kelowna Now event. Emily was there, these two start chatting soccer, football, whatever the Dutchies call it.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this guy's pretty charismatic and he manages 300 properties. We got to get him on the show. So yeah, awesome guest, like super high energy. Really loved having him on. He does some amazing things in the real estate and the rental pool market, but his true passion lies in soccer. So he's actually started a full-blown soccer academy here. And we've heard it's kind of like the Mighty Ducks versus, I don't know, whoever the Mighty Ducks play when they walk in and they're like black jerseys and they're just like equipped to the nines. So yeah,
Awesome.
Ezra, kudos to you to start in a football league in
Yeah.
Kelowna that's getting a pretty good reputation.
Yeah. Also, okay, another little dovetail here is we have exciting news because of this podcast, and probably only because of this podcast. Government has changed the rules from the 4-month notice for the tenant evictions to 3 months notice because of people like Taylor not being able to hold their approval rates for longer than 120 days or whatever the 4 months was. So because of that, the government has caved a little, and instead of increasing the notice the tenant gets to evict from 2 months to 4 months, it's only gone from 2 months to 3 months. Actually, it's going from 2 months to 4 months back to 3 months.
Which is great
Yeah.
news. Obviously it has to happen, but it just shows how like crazy it's been for the last year for
I know this
people in the
podcast has really
industry.
taken off.
Yeah, good job, guys. Thank you for your service.
We
Yeah.
recorded this show a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
All the legislation was there, the rules were there, it was already approved, and then weeks later they change it. So we have to change our intro and highlight
Yeah.
this stuff. So yeah, we really got to be on our A game here.
We'll send them the bill. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else can you change next?
Taylor and I will get together in our lair and we'll come up with something crazy.
Yeah. I can't wait.
Yeah, the 30-year AMS, which also because of this podcast, CMHC financing, right, Taylor?
Yeah, we have highlighted longer amortizations for a while. I think it is a good program. It's really
Yeah.
not applicable to too many people in the market, but
Yeah.
it's a move in the right direction. So
Yeah.
worth looking into for sure. I think there's a lot of new benefits for first-time home buyers with property transfer tax, sliding scale going up, first home savings account, 30-year AMs for new builds. So yeah, they are trying to make it a little bit more affordable. But in terms of this show and rental properties, I loved Ezra's answer. He was like straight to the point. Any questions, he just laid
Yeah.
it out there. He was confident about it. I think everyone's going to love this show. So if you're
Agreed.
looking to use a professional manager, reach out to him, whether he's your guy or not. I think he's a great guy, a great resource, and definitely worth having a chat to.
Or if you want to get involved in Kelowna football or Kelowna soccer,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. And he's got his own podcast about soccer. So
Yeah.
What's his podcast?
Ezra's House, I think he calls it.
Nice.
Seems like he's gaining some traction on that front too. So
Yeah.
yeah, man, this guy does it all. He's all over the place. So
Matt, you should put Julian in Kelowna City FC. I think they started like a year and a half.
They do. Our neighbors are doing it. I think
Okay.
Julian is a little too young, but this show, like every show, is sponsored by. Do you know who sponsors the show, Emily?
I do, Matt. I think it's Century 21 Assurance Realty.
Yes, it is Century 21 Assurance Realty, the best brokerage in town, the only Century 21 in the central North Okanagan now, which is kind of exciting. I'm an agent there. Emily is an agent there. We both love it.
If you need an agent, call me. Don't call Matt. Just kidding.
Yeah, or if you're an agent looking to change brokerages, call me, call Emily, call Max, call Dean. Love to talk to you about coming over, but enjoy the show. This is a really good one.
okay, welcome to the Kelowna Real Estate Podcast, Ezra. Thanks for joining us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's nice to be in some air conditioning. Don't get me wrong, I love Kelowna, but jump on a call and have a chat. Just appreciate you having me here.
Well, today's only like 30. It's been like 39 for the last month, feels like. So, yeah.
Oh man, I run at 5:30 in the morning on Monday, and I swear to God, it was 32 degrees, and I was like, but
Yeah.
hey, it is cooler today, so
Yeah.
we'll take it.
What's a perfect Friday look for like for you there, Ezra?
Not working? Nah, I'm just teasing you. So I schedule stack heavily. I've got a couple coaches personally. I have my morning meetings on Fridays. Like that's really key. I chime in to my teams. From there, usually Friday afternoon, kids are off at 2:30 and planning the weekend, which is usually out in the bush somewhere. But Friday is a nice day where I'm really just having executive meetings and then flying off into the weekend, because there's nothing like beating the Friday weekend warrior traffic, where if you leave at 2:00, it's a lot easier than 4:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your role? Like, what's your title? What do you do for a profession?
Yeah, that's a great point. I would say, I oversee multiple businesses is really in the end, with a major focus on property management, and then dabbling into real estate, where I do mainly referrals just to really help my owners to achieve their goals rather than just talking property management. I can now talk real estate and have a professional opinion. And then over the last year, a passion project being owner of Kelowna City Football Club. which is a cradle to grave football club affiliated with where I used to play as a kid, the Vancouver Whitecaps. So that's been a project that has taken up a little bit of time. And now as I head to the summer, focusing mainly on property management, dabbling in the real estate and the football world.
I love it, man. Well, that's how you and I kind of met, is through Emily and then through Best of Kelowna. And yeah, it was good to meet you. You can tell you got a ton of passion with all three of those topics. Can we just dive straight into property management to start with? There's
Absolutely.
a lot of BC tenancy changes, but what's your portfolio look like? Like, how many people are on your team? Kind of how'd you get into it?
Yeah, well put. So I'm from Nanaimo and South Nanaimo, to be very clear. And what happened was I bought my first property in Kelowna, actually, 2003. That was the time during the fires, actually. I bought in Black Mountain, couldn't buy the property because we couldn't get fire insurance, and was a homeowner. You know, I'm a first generation Canadian. My parents are very hard Europeans. And at that age, they said, hey, get in the market, buy your property. Why rent when you could buy? And at that time, you know, 199,000, buy with a buddy and have a mortgage of $500 each. You're like, giddy up, let's head to Big White.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's where I got a taste of lifestyle and obviously real estate. Eventually went back to Nanaimo in Victoria, went to school at University of Victoria, played soccer there. I left Nanaimo again just to kind of gallivant in the soccer world, traveling the world, specifically Holland. And I rented my place out. And my dad was very much look a man and a woman in the eye and shake their hand. And my first tenancy agreement was a handshake in 2007. All worked out well because of relationships. But over time in my businesses, I just realized as I kind of evolved, I loved houses. I joke around, it's because of my Dutch blood. We like to be nosy, right? We like to look at people's houses, right? And in 2019, I have a colleague, she's a mentor of mine, Lindsay Anderson, and she works for Vantage and got me in touch with this guy named AJ Hazy. Sold myself in a 28-minute meeting that I can do this, and here I am. Over the last 4 or 5 years, I have a portfolio of just under 300 properties. I have a team of 4 unlicensed people. I also have a full-time licensed person, and really just learned the ropes through experience and obviously being mentored by Lindsay and AJ. Here I am. I feel over the last 5, 6 years, and then personal knowledge over the last 20 has put me into this position to really help out an owner. You know, I'm not trying to be cheesy in sales, but once you really get into something, and with my background of competitive soccer, I have this obsession that if I'm going to do something, do it all in or not at all. And here we are.
That's funny. When I bought my first rental property, Evan Good helped me and Lindsay Anderson helped me. Lindsay is awesome. I can vouch for everything you're saying. She's fantastic.
I just had a chat with her and she says hello because it's a small world in Kelowna. And I was in an office with her for my first 2 years, and it was the best possible situation to set myself up for success and a lot of laughter.
Yeah.
I got to ask it, like, how do you have all your hair? Like 300 units is, you know, most people struggle with like a couple of units. How do you mitigate the stress on it? Your phone.
Yeah, you know what? It's a great point. You know, I am getting a little bit of gray here. I giggled. But number one, I think that's very key for everyone, that there is stress in property management. There is risk. There's none of this sugarcoating. Hey, especially with the numbers that we do, it's inevitable. And it's all about mitigating risk. Yeah. I think for myself personally, being in the nonprofit amateur soccer industry, set myself up for dealing with adversity, politics, problems. So for me personally, that really set the stage of adversity is nothing new in regards to dealing with it, just through kind of growing up through that industry. And in the end, it's all about, you know, not jumping to conclusions. It's very important to have processes and policies in place. And even my phone, I have a team line. I don't have a direct line. If you are going to grow to more than 30 properties, let's say, building that infrastructure is very, very important to success of your owners and tenants. We represent owners, but we want happy tenants and we want really strong relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. I mean, if you're not focused on keeping the tenant happy, it's not going to be a good situation.
It makes everything way easier when you have a good relationship. Like, honestly, I preach this all the time because it just, if they start digging in their heels, it's over.
It's so key. And I tell owners that all the time, that it's so easy to kind of have your nose up at tenants, you know, the bourgeoisie and that sort of mentality. And you just can't, especially under British Columbia law. And again, people could be like, oh, you're obviously kind of, you know, biased towards ownership, but it's true. You know, let's go to Alberta and learn about their law, you know what I mean, compared to ours. So the relationship is very important on behalf of the owner. And I say that, I go, I love all tenants. They're good people. And even when they're wrong or not doing what's right, giving them that respect will in the end help the owners achieve their goal, even if it is the worst case scenario like eviction. And I'm proud to say, with the amount of properties I have and how long I've been in the business, I'm knocking on wood right now, I've never had to use that worst case scenario bailiff, dog the bounty hunter, for example. I attest it to respecting people even when sometimes they don't deserve it.
You've never had to use a bailiff in all those properties?
Never.
Oh my God.
I've been close, but that also goes back to when you respect people, keeping open lines of communication. So what I teach, and one day could I see myself, because I used to coach soccer, do I want to coach property managers? I don't know, but I do feel that there's a very important piece where as the adversity goes up, you change your communication lines. If you start hiding behind text messages and emails, I call them the grenades, right? Grenade, close the laptop. No, you get on the phone. And if it's even more serious, I'm going to knock on your door and let's have the old school chat. That is now what, in my opinion, the nuanced service that people want and deserve.
Yeah. I think it is just about relating to that person too, right? Like just knock on the door, handshake, be like, I understand where you're coming from, but this is the situation.
How much of a property manager's job is talking down the owner too? Like not talking down, but like kind of putting things in perspective.
Yeah, it's so true because every owner is different. And so many owners, if you have an emotional attachment to your property and I want the property back like when I gave it away, and that education and what I call in our onboarding of what's normal wear and tear, what does the law say, is a very key piece of setting up, because I do feel there's a lot of owners out there that don't quite like the game, which is BC law and all the above. And educating owners, even real estate agents, this is to shout out to you guys. You want the sale, but I feel it would be very important to have a licensed property manager in your back pocket that if they've never been an investor, call it the mom and pop investor, they really need to have that half an hour consult that is this for them. Because if they're a person that can't handle a bit of risk and adversity or scratches on the wall, I do have to have those very frank discussions with owners, and they can be very challenging because, some people don't like what the law has to say, but that's the law, that's the game. So if you're going to play the game, understand it. And when it happens, go for it rather than being emotionally upset over it. And that's a huge words of wisdom to real estate agents, helping those owners long-term, not just getting a quick sale.
Yeah. Well, what's changed in the last couple months for BC Tenancy then? Can we just kind of review it and dig into this?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've seen and hey, I'm a history, political science dropout student, but in the end, we all know there's a little bit of politics going on here in votes. That's a personal statement. You could probably poke holes in that. But in the end, as of July 18th, how do you get rid of someone that doesn't deserve to be gone, i.e., not paying rent and those sorts of things? And what people have been using is what's called the 13.1 clause, landlord use of property, where someone moves in, or your mom or dad or sister or brother, something like that, where it's a 2 months notice, 1 month compensation. You've got to stay there for 6 months in good faith. Let's make sure I state that. And we can always go back to what is good faith. In the end, the government has doubled down and now made that a 4 month notice, 1 month compensation. Someone needs to stay there not 6 months, but 12 months. And the person or the owner needs to go into a government registry and put in a whole bunch of details. I haven't done it yet because it's hot off the press as of 6 days ago to state who's there, all the above, where it's really just holding the owners more accountable to the ones that I call are trying to pull a fast one. Well, what family member? What about this? And I don't think it's rampant in the industry. It's the bad apple ruining it for everyone.
I agree with that. I agree with
right?
that,
It's not everybody. There are very classic cases, but people will then just use the card. Oh, and just to note too, if a tenant wants to fight that, it's 30 days, not 15. So those are the main keys where they get an extra couple weeks to kind of fight it. Is it going to change everything? It's going to make people think a little bit twice. But the idea is to kind of close off people who are just being unfaithful and not being in good faith based on the eviction process. Do I think it's going to change that much? No, it's not so much the notice. I think having to fill out the registry and really be a little bit more transparent. I don't want those people to, do things in bad faith. But from an investor's point of view, a bird's eye view, and I have these chats with people, it is making investors think twice about investing in this province because the red tape is heavy. And, you could say the deck of cards are stacked against you. And that goes back to, it just makes it more challenging, but it also maybe reiterates that you need a licensed professional if you're going to get in the game. And I'm not saying come to me, go to someone else, but if you're going to do it yourself and you don't know the laws, you could easily get slapped, even when you're in good faith, because you just didn't know. Where I've seen cases where, man, 12-month penalty times $3,000 a month. I've seen cases where people have to pay $36,000 to the tenant only because they saw it back on Marketplace and they're going for the gusto. Yeah. And obviously I'm biased, but I'm in arbitration cases, and boy, sometimes I'm like, how does the tenant get all this when they didn't even submit their evidence? Okay.
I have a client that just lost because he evicted the tenant to move there himself, and then he hasn't lived there enough that the arbitration found. So he had to pay a year's rent. So like, he did live there, he just wasn't living there enough. So like,
and I've even heard cases when it was 6 months, people would be there 8 months, but you weren't there in good faith. Right? And how do you debate good faith? How do you legitimize good faith? Where they were there even further than the law 6 months. So in the new law, let's say you stayed there 14 months, but for some reason you couldn't provide the evidence of good faith, which one could argue is subjective. Yeah. I'm not a lawyer, but I watched a lot of Law and Order as a kid. And obviously I'm like a lawyer in arbitration, where that is super scary because, how do you argue that good faith? And you really need to have your ducks in a row. And that's going to investors, having a very good licensed professional, not just a professional that has their license, someone where you interview, their history, they're serious, that can properly give you the reassurance to be successful on your behalf.
So just a kind of observation here, but like the changes that happen with the tenancy are really all seem to be about getting the tenant out. But like, my point of view, when you buy a rental property, like you buy it for the long term. Like when I buy a rental property, or when I advise my clients, it's not to hold the rental property for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then sell it. It's to basically hold it forever and refinance it as it gains appreciation, right? So like, do you think we're still in a good environment to invest like that?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I think why this is magnified is when I started, rent prices were right? Yep. And then they all went up like 40%. And this is what kind of spiked. And, I don't know when the government reviewed this, but governments are historically slow in policy, right? Yeah. So they're reacting to what happened even 2-3 years ago when everything spiked 30-40% in rental increases, in the generalized market. And they're looking at their place going, hey, tenant Dave, you're paying $1,800 and I like you, but I can now get $2,500. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think this is what started it all, where, now we're seeing, the market's gone down a little bit or corrected itself a little bit, 18-20%, where now we're really just in this ebb and flow of the property management world or the rental price. It's stayed pretty stable over the last year, except for our seasonal changes. So my answer is yes. We're just seeing a bit of a reaction to this crazy market of going up and then reacting, where, nowadays, majority of new owners specifically and new investors are saying, okay, yeah, I'm in it for the long haul. I just think the saliva of the owners that have been around for 5+ years, the capitalistic nature, which in their argument, my fees have gone up, my mortgage has gone up, all the above. I really think it's going to settle out, and we're going to be more in a stable market where you're not going to have screaming tenants, because this is also why this has occurred, because the cost of living has skyrocketed. Yeah. Bottom line.
Yeah. I guess on that point, like, let's say if there's more red tape and maybe it's less incentivized for investors to buy these properties, fees are going up for everyone. Like, as an investor yourself, do you feel that more rental units are going to be built for the average person to, say, buy a secondary condo and rent it out themselves or through a professional manager? Like, is it just going to be detrimental to the market in terms of like, there isn't such of a rental market there because we're being handcuffed as like the capitalistic point of view?
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, when it comes to the laws from the residential tenancy branch, that's not the concern, in my opinion. Knowing that, playing off your point is, I'm here for the long term. I'm not here to, have someone rent it and then, do something in bad faith. Because usually, they're actually moving in good faith. I'm just taking my home over, and that's why it's 4 months, 1 month, and I'm actually going to live there and it's great. What's more concerning is just, everyone back in the day could make a little bit of money. right? Pay off their mortgage and have a little bit of a positive cash flow, where that's more of the concern now, where there's a building, and now I'm talking specifically Kelowna. I don't know other areas in the rental market. I can only give a couple examples where what's it going to cost for you to get in the market? You can't have that expectation that you're going to be cash flow positive or even cash flow neutral based on 20% down, for example.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of just readjusting the picture, what it's going to cost to get in the market to buy, more in your guys' position, but then being very honest on what is the return as a rental, where, hey, you might have to pay $500 a month into your investment, but you're still, paying off your mortgage, all the above, or you're going to have to maybe put 30 or 40% down on that condo to be neutral. That's more of the concern for me, because a lot of owners come to me, no offense, real estate agents, and they come to me and go, hey, Ezra, my real estate agent said I could get $2,800 for my 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo on Costin. And I said, they said that, eh? And I'm a professional, so I don't want to be like, well, he's full of shit, pardon my language. But I have to gently tell them the market reality is 2,200. And then they don't like me because I'm very direct and honest. And obviously dislike is a strong word. But I have to gently let them know that the market isn't 2,800, it's 2,200. And then they go, but my mortgage is going up in a couple months. And now that 500-600 is this. So it's not doom or gloom. I think it's very important for real estate agents with their investor clients to really either do their research in rentals or align themselves with a property manager and really have a three-way discussion. I have several real estate agents that work with me to say, hey, I'm not here to take your client. I'm not here to do that. I want them proactive and set up for success based on the reality, not what you told them 3 months ago. And now they're like, ooh, this burns.
Yeah, for sure. So to go back into the change in laws, we'll just wipe out like the investor conversation. But in terms of, and this is, part of Matt's conversation too, when people are going to sell a property, whether it's a rental or even owner occupied with a basement suite, to have a 4-month notice now, how do you foresee that going? Like, are there just going to be a lot of mutual agreements and tenancy? And if that's the direction it goes, like, is there going to be a more standardized, or is that going to be more acceptable? Because I feel like mutual agreement and tenancy is such a taboo, like, oh, we're going into like this agreement with the devil. Yeah. How does that look? Yeah.
I would put it this way, and I'm not, as a licensed real estate agent, I do more referrals, so I'm not deep down in how that works with the mortgages and closing and that period. I've heard some rumblings that 4 months can make things a little bit more challenging, so that's out of my wheelhouse. But absolutely, I've been doing mutual agreements for the last 5 years, and this is going back to my relationships and all the above. And in the end, we call that the golden ticket, not within the law, but there's no, let's discuss good faith. Let's do this. It's a reason why I got into a little bit of real estate, because during that peak of everything going up, owners and real estate agents were like, Ezra, the tenant, you've got a great relationship. Can you get this for me? Right. And in the end, it is a benefit to the tenant. I'm not here to say it's just for the owners, but then you start looking at, okay, they know it's 4 months, 1 month. Maybe you're offering 2 months. Maybe you're offering 3 months, but you're working with the tenant. You're not forcing them to sign. You know what it says on a mutual, and you're really just working together. And in the end, the owner, you're probably going to have to cough up some more compensation, but you're getting that very important document being the mutual. And do I foresee more mutual agreements because of this? The answer is yes. And the cynical Dutch blood in me, I'm really hoping that the government doesn't think that that's unethical, because that form is very clear that this is mutual. And that paragraph on the very top very much states they don't need to sign it. But absolutely, I foresee more mutual agreements moving forward.
Yeah. Uncharted territory for kind of everything at this point, much like a lot of the legislation that's come out this year. Any other changes you wanted to highlight for us?
Yeah, what this is a big thing for me is the media. And I hear a lot of owners of the doom and gloom and the worst case scenario. Even I saw a little perk when you said, hey, you haven't used a bailiff before, and the size of my portfolio. It's not as bad as you think, guys. And I say this to your audience. You know what? I have over 250 properties. I have 4 ongoing arbitration cases right now, and I already settled one of them. Why? When you hire a proper professional that works with you, you don't get into these situations when you have a good relationship, good processes, good experience, that owners don't need to fear. Yes, there's risk, but it's all about mitigating that risk through the application process, through your legal agreements, and how you flow out of it. Like I said, so if I have 4 arbitration cases on 250, what is that? Like maybe 1.5%, maybe. And I think 2 of those I inherited the tenants because the owner was doing it on themselves and they needed some help. So what I'm trying to say is that owners, you don't need to be scared of that worst case scenario, which I feel the media never talks about the 99% of good tenancies.
Yeah.
It's always the bad ones. And that, if you do it right and find the good people, and what I mean by good is just people who pay rent and keep it clean and don't do damage,
Yeah.
they're totally out there. And there's a whole new market now for what I call professional tenants who are just not wanting to get in the current market, or they're saving up to get in the market. There's a plethora of those people. And when you buy your property, find a place that, that's not just a dirty basement suite as the stereotype and something a little bit desirable. You will find those good people.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. What do you find tenants are looking for right now? Like, is there a void in the market where it's like, oh man, I do not want a 1-bedroom condo? Like, are people looking for a whole house or a basement suite? What's kind of hot right now?
Yeah. What is hot and where is the safest conservative investment bet? Studios. Remember when studios were like, you can't get a bedroom? What are you doing? Now it's the new in thing. We don't have any stuff, don't need anything. It's a safer investment. And I got to tell you, studios are running anywhere from $1,300 to $1,600 plus utilities. And you know what? It's a safer investment because of the price point. They're more popular because of the cost of living. Studios are what I would recommend to an investor. If you were saying, hey, I got 600,000, I wouldn't get a 2-bedroom. I would go get 2 studios because they're only going to be more popular if I was a betting man in the future because it's the affordable. And everyone goes, well, isn't that just for young people and students? The answer is no. I've got a lot of awesome working professionals that, would rather keep money in their pocket. They don't need a lot of space. Kelowna is absolutely beautiful. So I'm not going to be in my cubby hole. I'm going to be all outside and you're off to the races. So I do see studios as a huge in your favor as an investor. And where I would kind of shy away from, you just got to be a little bit careful, is the 2-bedroom condo market. Right? Those are a little bit more challenging to rent because there's more dynamics and you're trying to get a higher price point. Well, then you get into roommates and then you only get 1 parking stall. And, there's a lot more moving pieces. And same with townhouses. The townhouse market fluctuates. In the peak, I was renting for $3,800 plus utilities. And now I've gone down to $2,800 to $3,200 plus utilities, where studio suites have continued to creep up a little bit.
That is very interesting.
I love your answers, man. Like, I ask a question and you hammer it. No offense to Matt and I or anyone else who's been on the show, but it's usually like, well, yeah, maybe this, maybe that. You're committed to it. I like it.
Oh, buddy, I tell you, man, it all comes back to my past. I was an old soccer player. And when a coach said you need to juggle to 100 times, you just get stuck in. And I think you guys know I'm passionate. And here we are. I'm not pissing around. And I take my job very serious that, these are big investments. They're not the day where, my wife bought her first condo for 80 grand on KLO. We're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in executive homes. Like, there needs to be that seriousness. And, I think I love to have fun. If anyone knows me personally, I'm a goofball. But when I step on the pitch or I step in the office, it's go time. And excellence is the only answer.
I love it.
Okay, Ezra, I got a question for you about rent increases. Because of these harder to get rid of tenants, for myself and also for my clients, I've been saying, like, you should keep up with your rental increases, because what's going to happen is in the few years, you're going to end up with a condo that you can't sell because the rent is way under market. And also you're getting way under market rent for your own investment. So how much can you raise the rent in BC, and what's your advice on that?
Yeah, you know what? Great point. Depends on what you're getting. So if it was prior to the boom, 2018, 2019, and everything's increased 30%, obviously you're going to do your rent increases. And for a while there, we wouldn't even tell owners. We would just do them because it was a no-brainer. Every owner said, get it done. It's a different market now. So it really depends. In a current market, if they paid a year ago and they're actually above market and it's actually dipped a bit or even, that 3%, or, it fluctuates per year. I think it's right about 3% right now. Where is it worth it? Because then if they leave, there's a good chance of vacancy. Like, there's 240 condos right now on Castanet alone. There's still a tenant market. And what if it's an awesome tenant? So it does depend on what their base rate is. Because I'll tell you this, rent increases, there's high emotion to it. Even though we think it's 30, 40 bucks, man, I got tenants, doesn't matter what demographics, whatever, kick rocks, Ezra. Right? And you're like, it's $26. It's the principal, right?
Yeah.
You know how much my cantaloupe and my cucumber cost me? And I'm like, okay, fair. So I would be very careful just saying carte blanche, which we used to do. It's really about when did they get in the market? You know, anyone that was prior to that huge increase. But right now, especially if they're awesome people, it goes a long way because you have the relationship to say, hey, Johnny, you know what? I'm not going to raise the rent this year because you already know you're getting fair market value, right? You want to keep good people. It's not worth hiring me another 50% of the first month's rent for a placement fee if you're with a licensed person, costs again, or for yourself to go do it. I know all owners moan about like, you know how many hits I've had on Marketplace, like I can't deal with this. That it really just goes based on a case by case. And that's the nuance now. We have those conversations with every owner. And really, I'm a little surprised at the emotional response, but there definitely is an emotional response. And to all you investors out there and real estate agents, tell your clients, call them up ahead of time. If you are giving them a rent increase, talk to them. Even if you're just crying the blues on your mortgage rate and your insurance, have that connection rather than back in the day, it was a dirty letter on the envelope that you used to tape, slap, take a picture and run, right? Those days are over with email serving, but be proactive with your tenant if you are going to do a rent increase.
Yeah. You touched on a point I wanted to talk about anyways, is the like 50% placement fee. What should somebody expect to have to pay a property manager?
Yeah, you know what? It's pretty standard in the industry, anywhere from, you know, around 10% to manage the property. This is virtually, I legally become the owner on their behalf. I do a full onboarding process and we deal with everything. Obviously, if we're going to spend the owner's money or if there's some adversity, there's communication and discussion based on tactics on how to move forward because every owner is a little different. Some owners are like, just don't talk to me unless it's over $1,000. And then I have other owners that want to know when everyone flushes the toilet. So 10% to manage the property in and out, where you get a nice online portal, good communication, regular inspections, beautiful owner statements, direct deposits, easy peasy, go enjoy your day. And then the placement, which I call the heavy lifting, is a vacant unit, everything from showing the property, very detailed application process, which guys, everyone out there, really focus on your application process. Don't let your heart go, I really like that guy. Those are the people you got to worry about the most. And all that process of legal documents, approvals, all the way to a very detailed move-in report, 50% of the first month's rent with management. I've heard if you only look for just the placement because you want to manage it, which is totally fair, a nice foundation of a professional and then passing it off, anywhere from 75% to 100% of the first month's rent. That's pretty standard across the industry. Some people might do a little less on the management, depending on how many properties or, you know, what have you. But at Vantage, that's the classic 50%, 10%.
Yeah.
What if you have to deal, like, what if they call you and there's a plumbing issue and you got to call a plumber? Like, is that included or like, how does that work?
Yeah, so details are always in the devil. Please, all owners, read your management agreement. I really like Vantage because we're super simple, right? Where I've heard other agreements where it's like, if a plumber charges $200, I make 5%. And you're like, kick rocks. It's all part of the service where, you know, some contracts or agreements out there I've heard, but maintenance is all part of managing the property in our philosophy here at Vantage. We have a very good program. We actually use software with AI. So when you use the toaster and your coffee machine and you think there's an outlet problem and I call an electrician for $150 and he flicks the fuse, you know, we actually have AI that clicks in and gives you YouTube videos to go, oh, that's your problem. Have you checked the fuse? Do you know how to flick a fuse? And we've saved up to like 20% of maintenance tickets just on AI technology. And it's a great interactive program for tenants to feel like they've been heard. How many times do you hear tenants going, they never get back to me? Right? So it's a nice maintenance ticket tool and it brings in the owner. And this is one thing in our infrastructure, for example, my portfolio, that really takes us to the next level of customer service.
Yeah, I think for the fees, like it is some of the best money you can spend in real estate. Like 10% may seem high when we're talking about, you know, like a real estate agent commission or something, but for the actual rent roll that you're getting and you're giving up in the expense, it is hands down like you're going to make that money back all day. I see a lot of investors doing their
You save that much money in Tylenol.
Seriously. But you see a lot of investors, like they do their pro forma and like, hey, this is what I'm going to make I'm like, well, you haven't included a property manager. Like, I'm just going to manage it myself. I'm like, even if you are, you should still analyze it with, 10% or whatever the property manager is going to
paying
estimate in there.
yourself or whatever. Yeah.
Because in 6 months, if you're going to pull your hair out and use a manager, you need to be able to incorporate that as an expense. So,
And to kind of tie in BC law, like, don't mess around. All it takes is you to be naive and think you know it because you read the RTB, which, by the way, if you have all the time in the world, you can do it yourself. I want to make that very clear to your audience out there. But if you're going to be naive, I would hate for you to get caught and now you have a $36,000 penalty and you're like, right? Because the problem is you don't know what you don't know.
yeah.
And that gets you caught. Where if you have a licensed professional beside you being like, whoa, owner Bob, let's talk about this. And they're like, oh, I had no idea. Didn't even know to ask that question. And that's where I joke around. It's kind of like an insurance policy. We all hate insurance until we need it. Yeah. And in this world, being a professional, specifically with tenants and Google, right? You have to remember there's tenant Facebook pages that talk to each other and go, oh, you can do this. Like, it's not the old age where they don't have the information. And I think it's worth every real estate agent out there at least discussing with their client. If you are new to the game or you've never done this yourself and you don't have the time to really just research it, do your real research before moving forward. Because it's always just what you said. Oh, I'll manage it myself. And then they get in a pickle and there's times they call me and I'm like, oh, you really are in a pickle. And it's like, sometimes it's too late.
Yeah.
I don't want to take that on.
And sometimes I don't. Like, I don't, let's just take on a massive problem that's going to take me 40 hours to solve. That's where, to be honest, I don't take a lot of tenant turnovers anymore. I'm not a charity. I'm sorry. Maybe there should be, right? Maybe there is.
What do you mean by that? What's a tenant turnover? Like a...
So you rented in a place and you did a tenancy agreement on a napkin and you got some problems and you call me up and you're like, Ezra, I want you to manage my property. And I said, oh, okay, let me go check it out. Send me all your documents. Let me go check out the property. Don't think I'm going to do it, but I'm going to refer you someone that might take it on. Right? Because it's also the relationship. Let's say you're an asshole, and pardon me if there's younger viewers here, right? I have to take over. You've already made it toxic, where I really enjoy coming from the beginning. That's very important because you're telling a story and you're working on that relationship. And that's not talked about enough in the industry because I've dealt with some very, very serious situations, mental health, people just go sideways. But because we started it and went through it, it's a lot easier to untangle rather than me coming in going, I've set up to fail because I'm trying to make my owner happy and I can't. And there's times where I'm just saying, I want to help. I have in my career. And there's certain times I will, especially if they're your friends, I'll take care of your clients, and again, that's part of relationship building, but I don't take them all because number one, it's not financially a gain and I can't win. So why would I go onto the field and lose for the sake of just being a nice guy? It's very strategic.
I actually totally agree with what you're saying because we touched on this earlier in the show, but like having a nice relationship, like so many times as an agent, I go in there and it sounds all good, but then I go meet the tenant and realize that the owner and the tenant absolutely hate each other. And by extension, they immediately hate me before I even do anything. And it just makes the process like 1,000 times worse. And most of the time it's the owner that's holding the bag at the end. Like they're the one that get screwed over. The tenants have all the laws on their side in this province. Like, it's hard to win. Like they have to be very in the wrong for them to lose. And a lot of the times what I see is that the owners make it so much harder on themselves and me just by not treating them with respect,
And I think it's okay, we're humans, to be emotional, especially about art. If someone steals your bike, you get upset. I want to go deal with it. I'm going to go down to the railway there and go find my bike. When the logistics is no, just call the police and put your serial number in. And that's another important piece of having that third party to absorb your emotions and then work together. Because what happens is something bad happens, emotion comes in, and then it degrades the relationship. And I think that's the key piece and the takeaway today is that relationship is so key. And having that buffer of your emotions because you're pissed off that they punched a hole in the wall, for example.
Yeah.
And again, I'm talking about the 1%. I think that's always very clear. 99 or let's go a little bit lower because the odd person will pay a little bit late. 95% of my portfolio is clean sailing and good relationship and off to the races.
Yeah, the emotional piece is hard to get around. But like you said, honestly, for me, that's like I can get emotional, but a property manager is the buffer. So like a few weeks ago, I was playing softball. My phone was ringing. Everyone was like, what is going on? Property manager in the Kootenays. She's like, hey, yeah, building's on fire. It's an apartment building. And I was like, oh, okay. What, like, is anyone hurt? Is the place
Make
burnt
this
down? She's
quick.
like,
I'm up to bat.
well, the fire department's on the way. I'm like, oh, so it's an active fire. She's like, yeah, the power went out, the tenant left, the stove was left on, power came back on, stove fire. I was like, all right, well, I don't know, call me later. Like, but it's her responsibility and she's an amazing manager. So you just isolate that scenario and whatever happens, happens. But yeah, you delegate the job to the person that's, the
You
best
don't sound
suited
like you
for
got
it.
very emotional there, Taylor.
No, I didn't. Well, 3 days later, the unit above it actually flooded and put out the fire. So
Yeah, the two go hand in hand. That was, like
yeah,
yin and a yang situation.
yeah.
Well, and I think that's key going to play off on your relationship and just generalize real estate agents and, investors. Really interview your property manager, really plug them with some good questions. Hey, what's your system? How does it work? I'm more of a team corporate, very structured, making the Dutch blood very proud, right? Where some are just like mom and pops and just started. And I remember when I first started as a licensed property manager, 65% of them are successful and make it where, it's the mom and pop. What are your structures for, what is your process for an emergency? What is it? Like I have bounce backs on everything that no matter what, it will get to a restoration company, 24/7, where in the beginning I was so serious. Like I was going to places at 3 a.m. and I'm like, I actually don't need to. But as an investor, like dig a little deeper.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of property managers out there that do it different. I'm very proud to say how I do it and how Vantage does it, but we're all very different and different personalities. For example, my team, you can tell I can talk. My mom said, sell ice to Eskimos, the whole bit. And that's super key for relationships and negotiations.
Yeah.
But I also have a licensed person who's absolutely black and white to the book. And it's this 1-2 punch, but not everyone's like that. I'm not saying I'm better than someone else because someone likes the mom and pop, one person, one cell phone, all the above. And you as an investor really need to kind of see what works for you and what makes you feel comfortable paying this person to do the job, because each property manager, each brokerage can do it very different.
Yeah. Since short-term rental legislation came out in the spring, have you seen quite a few more properties convert over to long-term rentals? Like are owners actively, pursuing and saying, hey, we've got this unit converting over? Do you have any high-level data on that?
I don't have primary specific data. Obviously, we know that they've had to. Has my phone been off the hook with a whole bunch of furnished suites, coming into the market personally? Not that many. Obviously, we hear about it, but I don't have the concrete data of how many Kelowna Airbnbs had to switch over. But you're definitely seeing more condos on the market than ever before. And I will say furnished condos can be challenging to rent because people have stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm always surprised that more and more furnished suites are being rented. It's kind of like the new gen is like, I don't have to buy everything and have junk and accept my phone and my laptop and my bag. Giddy up. So I'm a little bit more old school. And the market used to say unfurnished is the way to go. So no, I haven't seen this huge blip. But then that goes back to my point is there seems to be a lot of 2 bedrooms out there. And that's what you have to be wary about because those are the harder ones to rent, 1 parking stall, so on and so forth. So we have seen a hit, but we also, it's a little bit blurred because how many new builds have come onto the market? And that's what really floods the market is when a whole building comes up. And I'm going to use the one on Costin, I want to say 604, where a lot of these condos are investors. They're not people moving into them. And guess what? When you throw 50 and 100 onto the market, it blurs a little bit of the Airbnb market because you just have whole buildings coming on. And, I don't have the stats, but it seems like 88% of them are all investors that wanted to get in the game.
Yeah.
And I foresee that moving forward, by the way. I see all these buildings coming up and I'm going, I don't think everyone's moving into them.
Yeah.
There's
We've
quite
been
a
saying
few
that for a
rental
while.
only. Like how many rental only buildings are being built right now in Kelowna? There must be at least a dozen.
I think we've got like 3,000 units in the next couple of years for purpose-built rentals. It's
There's
insane.
a ton, and like they're all going to come for rent at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I talk about that all the time. And I think it's important for real estate agents out there that they need to understand there will be a mini flood of the market for that building. And for like 2-3 months, it's cutthroat, right? Everyone sees
Yeah.
the 8 units or 20 units. And I'm going, hey, I know you want your 2,600 for that one. It's probably worth it once this building fills up. But Billy down the road has the exact same unit, and he's saying, I'm $100 cheaper. And then you go $100 cheaper, and then they go $100 cheaper.
Price
You do get
wars.
this mini flood. And then the price wars hits, and then they're locked in, and they're like, well, Ezra, just raise it up $400 next year. And you're like, well, let's review residential tenancy law and the rent
that is not
increases
how
we
that
talked
works.
about.
Yeah.
For the furnished apartments, do they rent generally $50 a month more? What's kind of the standard rule of thumb?
Yeah, standard rule of thumb is you're not making more.
Okay.
Everyone's like, yeah, but my furniture's worth something. No, if anything,
Same with
it's
the
harder to
sale.
rent. It's a more narrow market. You know, and again, I wish I had data, but it's so hard in this business to have data. We do see furnished places going more than before, but it's actually narrows your market and you definitely don't get more. A little bit different in the executive home market, but when it comes to just generalizing, no, if anything I say, you're going to get the same and it's going to be harder to rent.
Interesting.
It's kind of the same with selling. Although I think with buying, people generally want the furniture more, but they're not paying extra for it.
And always tell owners, I say, hey, what do you think of your couch? They're like, oh, I really like it. It'll never look the same. I need you to think of a sweaty man sleeping on that couch. And no matter how you clean it, it ain't going to be the same. And even be like, well, Ezra, that's considered damage. You take them to arbitration. You're like, how am I going to prove that?
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, always really those proactive conversations are super important.
Yeah. I kind of look at the furniture piece of like, well, I can store it here for a couple of years and then take it to the dump, or I can take it to the dump now and rent it out. Like either way, it's going to the dump, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Facebook Marketplace can be pretty good, but like he's going to obviously take some time and energy to get that done.
Yeah.
And just to conclude, what I do just on a good note, hey, market it furnished or unfurnished and see what sticks, right?
Yeah.
That's another really good option for people.
Yeah, furnishing option. Yeah, that's what I tell my sellers too, that exact thing. Because you're right, some people just, they have their own stuff. Like, I don't want to throw away all my own stuff to have this stuff.
Yeah. And the root is really just finding the right good person. And through a vigorous application process and a gut opinion, by the way, we say our educated opinion. And then, you know, we all know the disclosures that we say for our clients in confidence, all the above. And it's like, hey, let's have the real chat here and give our gut opinion. It's always, we've used the line, your casa is my casa. And I always say, ask me the question, owner, would I rent to that person? I'm going to give you my blunt opinion. And I think that's what's great about myself. I'm not desperate to rent your place. I'm hungry, but I'm not desperate. And you know, it's easy to put them in and hard to get them out.
Yeah. Yes. To head into our wrap-up questions, as we're conscious of time for you, if you could buy one property in the Okanagan in the next 12 months, what would it be?
Ooh, loaded question. Now, are you saying from an investor or just strictly personal?
Either.
You could say both. Yeah. Whatever you want.
Yeah. You know what? Let's do both. That's fun. On an investor note, I mentioned it earlier, studios. Look at those studios. You can get in the game.
Like a pre-sale studio, would you do?
Depending location and the right price. A great example is that Cambridge building.
Yeah.
I believe it's on Leon there in Ethel.
Yeah.
You know, great value. It's a big studio. A lot of them are 400 square feet. They're close to downtown and they rent all day long. And I've got long-term tenants. So really look at the studios, something that's not quite right downtown based on price point. But I look at that Cambridge building right now that if I was personally to invest with everything that I know, I use that as a great example. I always say be a little bit careful in the Rutland area in regards to location. Really read your strata minutes on, you know, some of the security and things like that. Do your due diligence. But from an investor point of view, looking at studios, because I'm also very conservative, where you know they're going to rent, right? Where those townhouses and those high-end things, that can be challenging. And those are what take the biggest hit. So from there, and on a personal note, I just invested into my own property. My parents immigrated, both Dutch, from Salmon Arm. I picked up 40 acres 4 years ago from my Oma, who's passed. And I just bought into the family property, which is the connecting 80 acres. So eventually you'll see tree houses and Canadian bunkies, me making you pizza, playing the guitar that I'm terrible at in my next generation, which is a solid 15 years away. But that just is hot off the press in about last 2 weeks. So it's super key. I love Salmon Arm just from a personal point of view. But going back, Kelowna, I think you guys know the stats, and I'll kind of rant on this, is the future is incredibly bright with Kelowna and just population. Right now, we see a little bit of people moving to Calgary. We still people coming in, but long term seems like
they'll
Kelowna
come to their
is the
senses
place
there
to be.
eventually.
Well, that's what happens. You know, when you leave and then you come back. I'm so happy to be in Kelowna. Like it's such a great market. And my buddy came into town and he's like, Ezra, this place is clean. The people are beautiful. Like he's an Nanaimo boy and he's like, I'm coming.
All right, Ezra, if you could give your 20-year-old self any piece of advice, what are you saying?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is such a good one. Number one, patience. If you're a young person or just in general, think things through. If you're going to make a decision, sleep on it for not 24 hours, 48 hours, especially if it's a life-changing situation. That's number one. And number two, who's your coach? Who's your mentor? And not your mommy and daddy. Have that person that you can bounce ideas off to. In my life, my success is to all my coaches, to the point where I joke around, I'm Pinocchio with a lot of people helping me out. But if I had those mentors and that patience as a young man, I'm proud who I am. I've never been happier, but I also had to go through some serious turbulations and learning moments. So yeah, hey, everyone that's young out there, really kind of just sleep on it and grind it out. Don't be scared to get stuck in.
That's awesome advice.
I love it. That is good advice.
All right, Pinocchio, what is your favorite charity, or how do you get back?
Yeah, you know what? Interesting you say that. I don't know if it's a charity per se, but I'm definitely very interested in the BC Wildlife Federation, protecting, our fish, wildlife habitat. That is my new kind of things that I really like to do. And it's very important we take care of our environment. You see the changes, even just the smoke. My family's been through 2 major fires over the last 60 years and just creating that balance. I'm a little bit of a Libra. And then my last one is just giving back through coaching soccer. You see these young people and you see those eyeballs and you have such an opportunity to support people. And the game of soccer brought me a lot of life lessons. So to be able to give back and give my time to those players, giving soccer, but really it's the life lessons in that, for example.
Love it.
Can we give you a quick plug there? So you got your own podcast. It's mostly about soccer, Ezra's House.
Yep.
You're the owner of the Kelowna Football Club. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Kelowna City FC. There's an old soccer club in town called Kelowna United. And how fun would it be to have Kelowna City for anyone who knows Man United, Man City? That's been the latest passion project that's just kind of flowered through my relationships, long-term relationships. And, we're loud and proud in our first full season this past spring. We're going to have over 500 members this year, and it's all about building community. So I have a huge passion for bringing people together. Churches and pubs were historically areas where people would go. But how awesome is it to, for example, have a football club where people come and have those spontaneous hangouts? Because I'm tired of being like, hey, man, you want to hang out? And we're like, October 16th is open for me. So yeah, Kelowna City is a community football club, all ages. You want to learn a little bit more about my podcast? It'll bore you to sleep and make my mother proud. Ezra's House on Spotify.
I love it. Hey, something
I love it too.
The football club that really resonated with me a couple months ago when I met you and you were first talking about it was you're trying to create hey, the dad's playing in the football club and the kids see the dad or the mom see their parents play and then they want to play. And it's like just this holistic community, like you said. That's really cool. I think that's what I saw as a youth. Like when you see, people you look up to playing a sport, you kind of do it. But if you're building like a all age football club is super cool. Only if I could play football, I'd join, but I suck. So
you have an amazing coach at home, Taylor, man. No excuse for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and all ages. So for example, beach soccer, we have a beach pitch that just got built. Let's use it. Street ball, even just watching the game. Like it's not even for people who want to play. It's people who just like the game. If you're into tactics and interesting games, like football is a game of moving chess. It's very intriguing. I know you hockey players think there's no goals, but there is. And you mentioned earlier how entertaining was our Canadian national team against Argentina, for example. And going back to your point, that's what it's all about.
Well, the Canadian national team did get to the next level, scoring 1 goal in 3 games. So maybe there's not that many goals.
But it was entertaining.
It was entertaining as hell. There's no doubt about it.
Kind of to wrap up, that piece of seeing that succession is very important, and a place to call home. Right. I'm not a very religious guy now, but I grew up that way, a place to belong, a place to become. And we try not to cut players. So it's very important where when you wear the badge and you see your daddy or your mommy or someone else in town, and it's that look like, hey, man, how you doing? Yeah. Even if you don't know each other, there's that place of belonging. And on the other hand, though, we also have a deep passion for when a little kid says, I want to be messy, that we have the platform.
I think you should have said Alfonso.
Yeah, true. But unfortunately, everybody wants to be messy.
Yeah.
And
not my son, Alfonso.
No. Oh, that a boy, right? but we have a clear pathway to get there. You
Yeah.
want to get a sniff with the Whitecaps?
Yeah.
We'll make sure you get your sniff, because that's also part of it. We know it's sometimes just closure 99.9% of the time. But if there is that one, if Isaac Bulmer from Okanagan Falls can make it to the backup keeper, I already know the industry in football. There is some amazing talent in football in this region. There's over 5,500 players in the Central Okanagan right now.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. All right, Ezra, how can Taylor or I or our listener help you? What do you want from us?
Bring me back on in a year. That's how you can help me. I had a lot of fun with you guys.
Yeah.
And no, I think you giving your true opinion to anyone, good, bad, or ugly, it's all about the honesty card. So I've gotten to know you guys a little bit more, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And everyone's connected by a couple lines, especially in this town. And I think that's what's key. You know, everyone has opinions, but this is what I like about these conversations. They're long form. It's not just clickbait.
Yep.
And I even say that in general about everyone I meet. You know, I don't have an opinion about anyone until we have these kind of conversations. So
You can give me the tea about Taylor after.
that's really it right there, boys. You know, so I just appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
You know, anytime and anything you guys need, feel free to give out my number to anyone that needs some advice. I will give the time of day to people in football, property management, to ensure that they don't have those reactionary, oh crap, what have I done and what have I got myself into?
I love it, man. Well,
Love it
I had
too.
a ton of fun. Good energy today. And yeah, really looking forward to having you back on it. It won't be a year. How's your October 17th looking?
You know what? I'll be out in the bush in my tree stand, but make it November 15th or 16th. We're good to go.
All right.
We can do that.
Sounds good. Thanks, buddy. I
Ezra.
appreciate it.